Somewhere tonight, you're going to stand in a checkout line and glance at a lottery ticket rack. Maybe you'll buy one. Maybe you won't. But for a few seconds, your brain is going to do something strange. It's going to let you imagine waking up tomorrow as a millionaire. New house, new car, no more bills. But the real story of what happens after that moment is far stranger and far darker than anything your imagination just showed you. You picture freedom. Researchers who actually studied it found something closer to whiplash. Let's start with the fantasy, because it's worth taking seriously before you tear it apart. You wake up. Your bank account has 7 figures in it. What's the first thing you feel? Relief. Probably. The mortgage disappears. The credit card balance disappears. The tight, quiet anxiety that lives in the back of your skull about rent and groceries and emergencies finally goes silent. For most people, that silence feels like the entire goal of being alive. Money problems solved. Life, presumably, solved. Here's where your brain and reality start to disagree. In 1978, a team of researchers led by Philip Brickman set out to answer a deceptively simple question. Does winning a fortune actually make you happier? They tracked down lottery winners, people who had won what would today be worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and compared their reported day-to-day happiness to a control group of ordinary people who had won nothing at all. The results stunned almost everyone who read it. Within about a year, the lottery winners were not meaningfully happier than people who had never won anything. In some measures of everyday pleasure, simple things like enjoying a conversation or a meal, the winners actually scored slightly lower than the non-winners. Read that again. Slightly lower. How is that possible? You just handed someone the one thing almost every human being on Earth says they want more of. How could it leave them flatter than before? The answer lives in a concept psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, and once you understand it, you'll start noticing it everywhere in your own life. Your brain does not measure happiness in absolute terms. It measures happiness in comparison to a baseline, and that baseline quietly resets itself after almost anything happens to you, good or bad. The first bite of a great meal feels incredible. The 10th bite of the same meal barely registers. Your brain adapted. It moved the goalposts. Winning a fortune works exactly the same way, just on a much larger and more expensive scale. The new house feels miraculous for a few months. Then it becomes simply your house. The new car feels thrilling for a few weeks. Then it becomes simply your car. And you're irritated when someone dings it in a parking lot exactly the way you'd be irritated about your old one. Your brain isn't built to register a permanent step-up in circumstances as a permanent step-up in feeling. It's built to notice change, adapt to it almost immediately, and then start looking for the next thing to compare itself against. That's not a flaw. That's the same mechanism that once let your ancestors survive both famine and plenty without losing their minds in either direction. A brain that stayed thrilled forever after one good harvest would have gotten sloppy. A brain that stayed devastated forever after one bad one would have given up. Adaptation kept both extremes survivable. It just wasn't designed with lottery winners in mind. But hedonic adaptation is only the beginning of the story, because sudden wealth doesn't just fail to deliver lasting happiness. In a disturbing number of cases, it actively makes people's lives worse. Sociologist H. Roy Kaplan spent years studying major lottery winners across the United States and documented a pattern that has since been repeated in study after study. Roughly a third of lottery winners eventually declare bankruptcy. Some estimates for certain categories of major winners run even higher. Think about that. People who were handed more money at once than most people earn across an entire decade of working, and a meaningful share of them ended up with less than they started with. How does someone lose a fortune that fast? Not usually through one dramatic mistake, through 100 small ones, compounding. Family relationships shift first, often within weeks. Winners describe a strange transformation in how relatives and old friends treat them. Distant cousins reappear. Childhood acquaintances resurface with business proposals. Loans get requested, then expected, then resented when they're refused. Psychologists studying sudden wealth call this phenomenon financial predation, and it happens with startling speed. The very people who once treated you as an equal start, treating you as a resource, and that shift in how others see you can be more disorienting than the money itself. Then there's the identity problem, which is subtler and, in some ways, more corrosive. For most of human history, your role in your community was tied to what you did and what you contributed. You were the person who fixed things, or taught things, or grew things, or built things. Money was a byproduct of that role, not a replacement for it. Sudden, unearned wealth severs that connection overnight. You didn't build anything, you didn't solve anything. You bought a ticket and got lucky, and some part of your brain knows the difference even if it can't articulate it. Winners frequently report a strange, hollow guilt, a sense that they haven't earned the life they're now living, and that guilt quietly undermines the very confidence that would normally let someone enjoy new freedom. Purpose, it turns out, matters more to long-term well-being than comfort does, and purpose is exactly the thing a windfall doesn't automatically provide. Consider the difference between two people who each end up with $1 million. One built a small business over 15 years, failing repeatedly, learning constantly, slowly turning an idea into something real. The other bought a ticket on a random Tuesday and matched 6 numbers. Financially, they're now identical. Psychologically, they are almost nothing alike. The business owner has a story that explains the money, a narrative of struggle and growth that gives the wealth meaning and makes it feel deserved. The lottery winner has a story that explains nothing. Random chance offers no lesson, no identity, no sense of mastery. It just offers zeros in a bank account, and it turns out zeros in a bank account were never the actual thing making anyone happy in the first place. This connects to something else researchers have found again and again when they study wealth and happiness broadly, not just windfalls. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, working alongside economist Angus Deaton, found that day-to-day emotional well-being does rise with income, but only up to a certain point, after which additional income buys surprisingly little additional happiness. Beyond covering your basic needs and a reasonable cushion of security, more money mostly buys you more expensive versions of the same emotional experiences you were already having. A better car doesn't make traffic less annoying. A bigger house doesn't make an argument with your partner less painful. The furniture of your life gets nicer. The emotional weather inside it stays remarkably similar. So if the money itself isn't the thing that changes your life, what actually is? This is where the fantasy of sudden wealth quietly reveals what you were actually asking for underneath it. You weren't really imagining a bank balance. You were imagining an escape. Escape from stress, from obligation, from the low hum of financial fear that follows so many people through ordinary life. And escape, unlike money, genuinely does improve well-being. The research bears this out. Winners who used their money specifically to eliminate chronic stress, paying off debt, leaving a job that was making them miserable, moving away from a toxic situation, reported far more durable improvements in happiness than winners who used the same money primarily to acquire new possessions and new status symbols. The relief of removing a weight is real and lasting. The thrill of adding a shiny new thing on top of an already comfortable life fades almost immediately, exactly as the hedonic treadmill predicts. There's a deeper twist hiding in all of this, and it's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. If sudden, unearned wealth doesn't reliably deliver happiness, then the story you tell yourself in the checkout line, the one where money is the missing ingredient standing between you and a good life, might simply be wrong. Not wrong because money doesn't matter. It clearly does, especially when you don't have enough of it to cover the basics. But wrong in assuming that more of it, arriving all at once with no earned story behind it, would fix whatever feels unresolved in your life right now. Which brings you back to the two questions this whole fantasy was really asking. What would you actually do with freedom if you had it? And what, in your current life, are you already quietly waiting for money to solve? That money was never actually going to solve? Most people who imagine winning the lottery skip straight past those questions and go directly to the shopping list. New house, new car, trip somewhere warm. But the researchers who spent their careers studying actual winners kept finding the same uncomfortable pattern. The people who thrived afterward weren't the ones who spent the fastest. They were the ones who used the windfall to buy back something specific they had already identified as missing: time with family, freedom from a job that was slowly grinding them down, the ability to finally learn something they'd always wanted to learn. The money worked when it served a purpose the person had already decided on. It failed when it became the purpose itself. There's an old idea, older than lottery tickets, older than money in its modern form, that keeps surfacing across very different cultures and eras. Wealth without meaning tends to curdle. Communities that suddenly acquired resources without the social structures to absorb them, whether through conquest, discovery, or sheer luck, have a long historical track record of instability that follows shockingly similar patterns to what individual lottery winners experience today. Relationships strain under the weight of new inequality. Old roles lose their meaning. People report feeling unmoored rather than secure. It seems that this isn't really a story about money at all. It's a story about what happens when circumstances change faster than identity can catch up. Think about how differently this plays out depending on the speed of the change. Someone who builds wealth slowly over a career has years to practice being that version of themselves. They learn gradually how to say no to requests for money. They build habits around saving and spending that get stress tested a little at a time. They watch their own relationship to comfort shift in small, manageable increments. A lottery winner gets none of that runway. They go from one identity to a completely different one in the time it takes a machine to print a receipt. There's no gradual adjustment period, no chance to practice, no slow accumulation of the psychological skills that usually come bundled with financial success. It's a bit like being handed the keys to a plane and told to fly it, with no lessons, the moment after you've only ever driven a car. The controls might technically work. That doesn't mean you know how to use them. This mismatch shows up most clearly in decision-making. Researchers who interviewed winners repeatedly found a strange pattern. Many described feeling paralyzed rather than empowered in the months after their win. Should they quit their job immediately, or keep working for structure and routine? Should they tell their extended family the full amount, or protect themselves by staying vague? Should they buy the house right away, or wait and risk looking indecisive to everyone now watching them? None of these are questions ordinary financial planning prepares you for, because ordinary financial planning assumes gradual growth, not an overnight leap. Winners frequently made the very decisions financial advisors warn against precisely because they were making them under a kind of decision fatigue nobody had warned them about, exhausted by 100 new choices arriving all at once, with every friend and relative offering an opinion. And then there's the quieter, more private cost that rarely makes headlines: isolation. It sounds almost absurd on its surface. How could having more money possibly make someone lonelier? But multiple studies on sudden wealth report exactly this. Winners describe a growing wariness around new people, a suspicion that every new friendship or romantic interest might be motivated by the money rather than by them. Old friendships, meanwhile, often become strained by an invisible new inequality neither side asked for. You can't easily go back to splitting a dinner bill evenly with a friend who's stretching to make rent, and the awkwardness of that gap tends to quietly erode the relationship rather than end it in any single dramatic moment. Winners often end up surrounded by more acquaintances than ever and confide in fewer people than before. So the next time you find yourself standing in that checkout line, glancing at the lottery rack, let yourself run the fantasy all the way through, past the new house and the new car, past the year of vacations, and ask what's actually sitting underneath it. If the honest answer is relief from a specific, nameable weight, debt, a job you hate, a fear you carry every month when the bills arrive, that's worth taking seriously. Because relief like that has been shown again and again to genuinely change how a life feels. But if the honest answer is vague, more stuff, more status, more room, you're describing the exact pattern that researchers have watched fail to deliver lasting happiness for nearly 50 years of careful study. Because here's the strange, quiet truth sitting underneath every lottery fantasy you've ever had. You already have access to the one thing that actually determines whether sudden wealth would have helped you. It isn't the money, it's the clarity about what the money was supposed to fix. And that clarity, unlike a jackpot, doesn't require a single winning ticket. It just requires you to finally ask yourself the question, honestly, tonight, standing in line before you ever reach for your wallet.